We ended the last video on Pearl Harbor, and I think that's really an important place to start, as we'll start this video with Pearl. So the United States, again, we were attacked by the Japanese on December 7th, 1941. Again, this was a surprise attack. The Japanese foreign minister was actually, in Washington negotiating with Americans when he knew that the Japanese fleet was at sea heading towards Pearl Harbor. One of the strategic significances of this attack is this was an attack by aircraft carrier. And if you go back to this, you can see all this water, right, between Japan and Pearl Harbor. And over the years, there have been a lot of conspiracy theories that have been thrown up about Pearl Harbor, that FDR knew, that he let it happen because he wanted to go to war and all of that. And that I say, malarkey, baloney, no way. The United States knew that the Japanese naval fleet had left Japan. We knew that. We had watched, we had spies, we had boats out there. We knew that the fleet had left, but we didn't know where they were. Do you see all this water? This is thousands of miles of water. We did not have satellites at the time. We did not have long range aircraft that could just hang out over this water. We simply lost the fleet. We knew they were going somewhere, but we didn't know where. So there was a war warning message that had gone out to territories all around the Pacific. Pearl Harbor had been warned and was prepared for an attack, or supposed to be prepared for an attack. But remember, we also have territory in the Philippines, which is very important in the war. Guam, remember all those territories in the Pacific that we had taken over during, with that Spanish-American War, much earlier in the semester, but really only 40 or so years before this. So we have military bases all along here. The British, our allies, have military bases. They control Hong Kong. This is the Dutch East Indies, all of this. So all of this region was prepared for something. And if you're looking at this map and trying to think of the strategy of what the Japanese are going to attack, you would presume that they would attack someplace along here. They've already been attacking China. You would think that they would attack this region of the world. To travel all the way out here to Pearl Harbor seemed fairly unlikely just because of the distance. But the reality is the Japanese used their new aircraft carriers. They had a number of them filled with planes. And this was, they saw this as kind of their one shot to go in and wipe out the American naval fleet at Pearl Harbor, with the presumption that the Americans would be so devastated by this and that their racism about the Pacific would, win the day, that the United States just would be so defeated and so behind the curve by the time the Japanese took over the rest of this that we'd just let it go and wouldn't fight. Of course, that's absolutely the opposite of what happened. The Japanese attack Pearl Harbor. Some 1,100 Americans are killed immediately. 2,000 end up dying over the course of a few days. And it inspires the United States to fight. We're not going to forget this attack, this unprovoked attack, as FDR talked about. So this becomes kind of a rallying cry for the United States. Of course, it's important to recognize that the Japanese did attack more than the United States on that day. December 7th, 1941, they attack the Americans at Pearl Harbor, but they also attack Hong Kong, they attack Manila in the Philippines, they attack Shanghai, they attack many of these islands in this entire region. So Guam is attacked in that day as well. So this is a faceted attack that the Japanese took. They do not defeat the American naval base at Pearl Harbor, in part because our aircraft carriers happened to be at sea on a training mission. Uh, and the fact that they didn't make their third wave. They had 3 planned waves of their airplanes. They were going to come in and take out the ships. They were going to come in and take out the airfields and the ships. A second wave was going to do more damage, and then the third wave was going to hit oil reserves and kind of finish off everything. The Japanese never made their third wave. They were nervous because they didn't know where our aircraft carriers were, and so they left early. That gave us a chance as a nation. We didn't lose our oil reserves there, and we were able to repair our ships and very quickly send them out to sea. So the attack is December 7th, 1941. The United States declares war. The way war declarations work is often the president asks for the declaration of war, and then a joint session of Congress is going to make the actual declaration and vote for a declaration of war. And so on December 8th, 1941, we declared war on Japan. 2 days later, Germany and Italy declare war on the United States because they're allied with Japan, and we declare war on Germany and Italy as well. So now we are fully in it. Our allies, like Great Britain, Winston Churchill said, we will survive, right? We are not alone. He was relieved that the United States had finally gotten involved in the war, right? So back in America, we are in a little bit similar situation as we were at the World War I, where, remember Woodrow Wilson had said, we're not going to go to war, we're not going to go to war, and then all of a sudden had to convince everybody to go to war. World War II was a little similar in that we had said, we don't want to go to war, we want to have these neutrality acts in place. But by 1940 already, the United States had started shifting towards war. Once France had been defeated in Europe, the whole tone of things in the United States changed, where we knew that Europe dominated by a hostile power of Germany would be bad for everybody. So the United States had been sending materials to Great Britain for over a year, right? Since the summer of 1940 through the Lend-Lease Act and other things, we'd been loaning them money, we'd been giving them ships, we'd been giving them any materials they needed. When Germany turns against the Soviet Union, we started sending the Soviet Union the same kind of support. So the United States was really already in it. We were not really neutral in World War II before we, once the war actually started. Where Woodrow Wilson had said, with World War I started, had said, we'll be neutral in thought and in action. When World War II had started in 1939, Franklin Roosevelt said, we will be neutral in action, but we cannot be neutral in thought. We know there's a good guy and a bad guy here. We know there's an aggressor here with Japan and Germany. So once the United States finally gets involved in the war, it's not quite the convincing that the American people needed. People do run to sign up to be a part of this war effort after Pearl Harbor. Not quite as much as the movies make it sound like, right? Nobody wanted to go and get shot, but there was a real, this is our fight. You see propaganda like this. Propaganda was a huge part of this war as well, reminding the American people why they're fighting, reminding the American people what we're standing for. This idea of the 4 freedoms. These are Norman Rockwell paintings. The 4 freedoms. This idea of we're fighting for the freedom of speech, where we can stand up and we can say what we want and be in a free and safe space. The freedom of worship. The idea of being able to worship whatever God you wish in the United States, which is a basic principle of the United States. And you can see this image is diverse in some of its presentation. Freedom from want, right? This idea that, you know, having enough food to eat, having enough family around, and freedom from fear. This was the big one, this idea of, you know, being safe and not being afraid and knowing that your children will be safe at night. And none of these things existed in Europe or in Asia as the war began. None of these things were in place because of the conflict, because of the war. And the United States wanted to separate themselves from that and say, these are the principles we're fighting for. This is why you're sacrificing yourself. This is why your son is going to war. This is why your husband has been killed. This is why your children will be fatherless, because of these principles that really shape the United States. Franklin Roosevelt gives a speech and says that we're fighting for these things, and then the paintings are drawn by Norman Rockwell, right? So the United States on the home front, you know, we get very busy very fast. We have Army and Navy bases and airfields all across the country. The United States, again, has this great advantage in the war in that we are not being attacked. Of course, Pearl Harbor had been attacked. We do end up with some attacks up here in Washington State. Japanese submarines had come close to the shore and launched balloon bombs. One of which fell upon a picnic or a group of picnickers and killed a number of people, including children. But other than those very brief incidents, the United States really was a very safe place. We feared that worse would be to come, right? We worried a great deal, but we had this great advantage of, you know, not being under attack. So we have Army airfields, our Army and Marine and Navy bases all across the United States. We have our allies come to the United States to be trained, a number of airfields, especially in Texas. And you can see these red dots are all airfields. Do you see how many are in Texas? There's just a ton of them here. Because, you know, we've got big open spaces, and it's a great place to have airfields. You know, but you have European allies that are coming to the United States to be trained. The Chinese are coming to the United States to be trained at some of these different bases because, again, we're a safe space. American manufacturing goes crazy in this time, and many would argue that it's our stuff that wins the war. All right, so I'm going to pause here because I think keeping a little bit shorter videos is maybe better for all of us. So I'm going to pause here, and then we'll be right back.